Have you ever wondered why we can't find the Garden of Eden? Why, despite centuries of searching, despite satellite technology that can spot ancient ruins buried deep beneath desert sands, despite archaeological techniques that have uncovered civilizations lost for millennia, we still cannot locate the most famous garden in human history. Tonight, we're going to explore a possibility that most people have never considered. A truth so profound, so unsettling, that it's been hidden in plain sight within the very texts that describe Eden's existence. What if I told you that the reason we can't find the Garden of Eden isn't because it was destroyed, or flooded, or simply lost to time? What if the real reason is far more mysterious, far more significant than anyone has dared to imagine? Before we continue, please consider subscribing to our channel and leaving a like on this video. It helps us create more content exploring these profound biblical mysteries that have captivated humanity for thousands of years. What we're about to uncover isn't just another theory about Eden's location. This isn't about whether it was in Mesopotamia, or Armenia, or even some sunken continent. This is about something much deeper, much more disturbing, and ultimately, much more important for understanding our place in the cosmic order. You see, most people assume that when Adam and Eve were expelled from Eden, they simply walked out through some gate and life continued elsewhere. The garden remained behind them, perhaps withering without its caretakers, perhaps flourishing in their absence, but fundamentally unchanged, a place that could theoretically be found if we just knew where to look. But what if that's not what happened at all? What if the biblical text is telling us something far more profound about the nature of Eden itself, about what it really was, and about what really happened when humanity fell from grace? The clues have been there all along, hidden within the original Hebrew, scattered throughout ancient texts, preserved in the collective memory of civilizations around the world. Clues that point to a truth so staggering that once you see it, you'll never read the Eden story the same way again. So settle in, open your mind, and prepare to discover the hidden truth about what really happened to the Garden of Eden. Because what we're about to explore doesn't just change how we understand the past. It transforms how we see the present and the future. It reveals why every human being still carries within them a longing for a place they've never been, a homesickness for a home they've never seen. Let's begin where everyone thinks they know the story. Genesis tells us that God planted a garden in Eden in the east. He placed Adam there to work it and keep it. There were trees, rivers, animals, and of course, the two famous trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But here's where most people miss the first crucial clue. The text doesn't actually say God created a garden. It says he planted a garden. The Hebrew word used is nada, which implies something much more specific than mere creation. It suggests transplanting, establishing something that grows, something organic, something that exists in a state of dynamic relationship with its environment. This isn't just semantics. This distinction is crucial for understanding what Eden really was. Because if Eden was planted rather than simply created, it suggests that Eden was not just a place, but a condition, not just a location, but a state of being, not just a garden, but a way that reality itself was organized. Think about what the text actually describes. Rivers that water the entire earth, trees that grant eternal life, direct communion between the divine and human realms, animals that live in perfect harmony, a place where heaven and earth intersect so completely that God himself walks in the garden in the cool of the day. This isn't describing a mere botanical garden, no matter how beautiful. This is describing something far more profound, a dimensional space where the physical and spiritual realms exist in perfect integration. A place where the normal laws of physics bend to accommodate a higher order of reality. A cosmic nexus where time, space, matter, and spirit operate according to principles we can barely imagine. And this understanding is supported by the way ancient cultures around the world remember paradise. They didn't just recall a nice garden somewhere. They remembered a time when the gods walked among men, when the boundaries between realms were permeable, when reality itself functioned differently. The Greeks called it the Golden Age, when Kronos ruled and humanity lived in harmony with the divine. The Hindus speak of the Satya Yuga, the age of truth when Dharma stood on all four legs. The Chinese remember the time of the Yellow Emperor, when heaven and earth were in perfect balance. The Norse told of the age before Ragnarok, when the world tree Yggdrasil connected all realms in harmony. These aren't just similar myths coincidentally arising in different cultures. These are preserved memories of the same reality, the same cosmic condition that the Bible calls Eden. A state of existence where the dimensional barriers we take for granted simply didn't function the same way. But to truly understand what Eden was, we need to delve deeper into the Hebrew text itself. The word Eden comes from a root that means delight or pleasure, but it carries much deeper connotations. In ancient Semitic languages, the same root appears in words related to paradise, luxury, and divine abundance. But even more significantly, it's connected to concepts of dimensional richness, of reality operating at its fullest potential. When the text says God planted a garden in Eden, it's using a grammatical construction that suggests Eden was larger than the garden itself. The garden was in Eden, but Eden was the broader reality, the dimensional space, the cosmic condition within which the garden existed. Think of it like saying a city in the state. The city exists within the larger governmental structure of the state. The garden existed within the larger dimensional structure of Eden. This becomes even clearer when we examine the description of the rivers flowing out of Eden. The text says a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it divided into four heads. These four rivers, the Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, and Euphrates, have puzzled scholars for centuries. How could one river become from major rivers that we know flow from completely different sources? The answer lies in understanding that this isn't describing ordinary hydrology. This is describing dimensional flow, the way life-giving reality moved from the higher dimension of Eden into our physical world. The rivers weren't just water. They were channels of dimensional energy, conduits through which the abundance of Eden flowed into the physical creation. This understanding is supported by the way water functions symbolically throughout Scripture. Living water, rivers of life, springs of salvation. These aren't just metaphors. They're describing actual dimensional realities, flows of life-giving energy that originate in the higher dimensions and manifest in our physical world as literal water. But if Eden was a dimensional reality rather than just a geographical location, then what really happened when humanity fell? This is where the hidden truth becomes almost too profound to grasp, because the text tells us something very specific that most translations obscure. When God expels Adam and Eve from the garden, He doesn't just send them away. The Hebrew describes something much more dramatic. He sent them out using the word shalak, which implies a forceful sending, almost a hurling. And then comes the crucial detail. He placed cherubim and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. Now, most people picture this as God posting angelic guards at a garden gate. But look more carefully at what's being described. The cherubim aren't just guards. In Hebrew cosmology, cherubim are throne bearers, cosmic beings who exist at the intersection of dimensions. They appear throughout Scripture at moments when the boundary between heaven and earth becomes permeable. When Ezekiel sees cherubim, he struggles to describe them because they don't conform to three-dimensional logic. They have multiple faces, wings covered with eyes, wheels within wheels that move in impossible directions. These aren't creatures that exist fully in our dimension. They're dimensional beings, existing simultaneously in multiple realities, which is why they're perfect guardians for a dimensional boundary. And the flaming sword, the Hebrew describes it as revolving or turning every way. The word used here, hithapeket, suggests something that's constantly transforming, shifting, changing direction in ways that transcend normal space. This isn't a weapon in any conventional sense. This is a dimensional barrier, a reality distortion field that prevents access not just to a place, but to a state of being. What's being described here is nothing less than a dimensional lockdown. Eden wasn't destroyed or removed. it was shifted to a different dimensional frequency, sealed away from our fallen reality to prevent contamination. The cherubim and the flaming sword aren't keeping us out of a geographical location. They're maintaining a dimensional firewall between our corrupted reality and the pristine dimension where Eden still exists. This explains so many mysteries that have puzzled humanity for millennia. Why can't we find Eden? Because it's not in our three's dimensional space anymore. It exists in a higher dimension, a parallel reality that intersects with ours at certain points but remains fundamentally separate. Why do all humans feel homesick for a place they've never been? Because we carry within our very DNA the memory of existing in a richer dimensional reality. Our bodies, our minds, our spirits were designed to function in Eden's multidimensional environment, and we feel the loss of the dimensional richness as a constant ache, a homesickness that no earthly place can satisfy. But the implications go even deeper, because if Eden exists in another dimension, preserved and protected from the fall, then everything that was in Eden still exists too. The tree of life is still there, still bearing its 12 kinds of fruit, still offering the immortality that Adam and Eve forfeited. The rivers are still flowing, still carrying the life-giving waters that sustain paradise. The divine presence is still walking in the garden in the cool of the day, still available for the kind of intimate communion that Adam and Eve experienced before the fall. This isn't just theological speculation. Throughout history, mystics and visionaries have reported experiences that align remarkably with this understanding. They describe being caught up into paradise, seeing gardens of impossible beauty, encountering trees that radiate light, hearing music that transcends earthly harmonies. The Apostle Paul himself speaks of being caught up to the third heaven, to paradise, where he heard inexpressible things that man is not permitted to tell. What if these weren't just visions or dreams? What if these were actual dimensional experiences? Moments when the barrier between our reality and Eden's became permeable. What if certain individuals, under certain conditions, have actually accessed the dimension where Eden exists? The evidence for this is more extensive than most people realize. Throughout the centuries, saints and mystics from various traditions have described remarkably similar experiences. Saint Teresa of Avila wrote about entering an interior castle where she encountered divine realities that transcended physical description. The Sufi mystic Ibn Arabi described journeying through multiple levels of reality to reach the divine presence. Hindu yogs speak of accessing lokas or dimensional planes where different rules of reality apply. These aren't just similar because they're drawing from the same religious archetypes. They're similar because they're describing encounters with the same dimensional reality. The Eden dimension that was sealed away but not destroyed, hidden but not lost, inaccessible to ordinary consciousness but available to those who undergo the necessary transformation. But why would God preserve Eden in another dimension rather than simply destroying it? The answer reveals something profound about the nature of God's plan for creation. Eden wasn't just humanity's first home. It was the prototype for what all of creation was meant to become. It was the seed from which the full flowering of cosmic reality was intended to grow. By preserving Eden in another dimension, God preserved the original pattern, the divine blueprint for reality. Like an architect keeping the original plans while the building undergoes renovation, God maintained Eden as the template for the eventual restoration of all things. The dimensional separation wasn't permanent exile. It was temporary quarantine until the conditions were right for restoration. This understanding transforms how we read the rest of Scripture. Every promise of restoration, every vision of the future, every prophecy of renewal is pointing back to Eden, not as a return to the past, but as the expansion of Eden's reality to encompass all of creation. When Isaiah sees the wolf lying down with the lamb, he's not describing a future zoo. He's seeing Eden's dimensional harmony breaking through into our reality. When Ezekiel sees the river flowing from the temple, bringing life to everything it touches, he's witnessing Eden's rivers beginning to flow back into our dimension. The entire biblical narrative can be understood as the story of God working to bring our fallen dimension back into harmony with Eden's preserved reality. The calling of Abraham, the exodus from Egypt, the giving of the law, the establishment of the temple, all of these were steps toward creating conditions where Eden's dimension could begin to intersect with ours again. The temple itself is particularly significant in this understanding. The temple wasn't just a building where people went to worship. It was designed as a dimensional interface, a place where heaven and earth met, where the Eden reality could break through into our world. The Holy of Holies, where God's presence dwelt, was essentially a small area where Eden's dimensional conditions were recreated. This is why the temple was decorated with gardens, palm trees, flowers, and cherubim. It wasn't just artistic decoration. It was dimensional mimicry, creating a space that resonated with Eden's frequency. The priests who served there had to undergo elaborate purification rituals not because God is obsessed with cleanliness, but because entering a space where Eden's dimension intersected with ours required dimensional preparation. But the temple was always intended to be temporary, a localized solution to a cosmic problem. The real goal was the restoration of Eden conditions throughout all creation. This is why Jesus' ministry was so revolutionary. He didn't just perform miracles. He demonstrated Eden reality breaking into our dimension wherever he went. When Jesus healed the sick, he wasn't just showing compassion. He was manifesting Eden's reality where sickness doesn't exist. When he multiplied food, he was demonstrating Eden's abundance. When he calmed storms, he was exercising the dominion over nature that humanity was meant to have in Eden. When he raised the dead, he was showing that Eden's tree of life power can overcome even the ultimate consequence of the fall. But most significantly, Jesus described his mission in explicitly Eden terms. He called himself the way, the truth, and the life, essentially claiming to be the path back to Eden reality. He said he was the true vine, positioning himself as the real tree of life. He promised rivers of living water flowing from within those who believed in him, offering the very rivers of Eden to flow through human beings. The crucifixion itself can be understood as the ultimate dimensional event. On the cross, Jesus absorbed all the dimensional distortion caused by the fall, all the corruption that kept our reality separated from Eden's. His death wasn't just paying a legal penalty. It was absorbing the dimensional dissonance that maintained the separation between fallen creation and pristine Eden. And the resurrection? That was the beginning of dimensional restoration. When Jesus rose from the dead, he didn't just come back to life in our fallen dimension. He emerged as a being who could exist in both dimensions simultaneously. He could appear and disappear, pass through walls, be touched and eat food. He demonstrated what humanity will be like when we're restored to our original multidimensional nature. This is why the early Christians experienced such dramatic transformations. They weren't just adopting a new religious philosophy. They were beginning to resonate with Eden's dimensional frequency again. The gifts of the Spirit weren't supernatural additions to human nature. They were the restoration of capabilities we were always meant to have. In Eden's multidimensional reality, speaking in tongues, that's the restoration of the unified language. That existed before Babel's dimensional fracturing. Healing, that's Eden's wholeness breaking through. Prophecy, that's the ability to perceive across dimensional boundaries that was natural in Eden. These weren't new gifts. They were restored capabilities. Eden powers returning as people aligned with Christ's dimensional frequency. But this raises a crucial question. If the dimensional barrier has been broken through Christ, why don't we experience Eden reality all the time? Why do we still live in a world of suffering, decay, and death? The answer lies in understanding the nature of dimensional shift and the process of cosmic restoration. Dimensional restoration isn't instantaneous because our current reality has been shaped by thousands of years of dimensional separation. Every structure of our world, physical, mental, social, spiritual, has adapted to functioning in a dimensionally reduced reality. Restoration requires not just the removal of barriers, but the transformation of everything that has adapted to those barriers. Think of it like a plant that's been growing in darkness suddenly exposed to light. It doesn't immediately become healthy. It needs time to develop chlorophyll, to strengthen its stems, to adapt to the new condition. Humanity and all of creation need time to adapt to the returning light of Eden's dimension. This is why the New Testament speaks of groaning creation, waiting for the revealing of the sons of God. Creation itself is aware of its dimensional reduction and longs for restoration. Every earthquake, every storm, every natural disaster can be understood as creation groaning, under the stress of dimensional displacement, longing for the harmony of Eden to be restored. But the process has begun. Each person who aligns with Christ's dimensional frequency becomes a point where Eden breaks through into our reality. Each act of genuine love creates a resonance with Eden's harmony. Each moment of true worship opens a portal to Eden's dimension. We're not just waiting for Eden to return. We're participating in its gradual manifestation. This understanding also explains why certain places on Earth feel more sacred than others. Throughout history, humans have identified thin places where the barrier between dimensions seems more permeable. Mountains, springs, groves, and gardens often become sacred sites not because of superstition, but because of dimensional sensitivity. These are places where Eden's dimension presses closer to ours, where the veil is thinner, where transformation is more accessible. Jerusalem itself sits at one of these dimensional interfaces, which is why it has been such a focal point throughout history. It's not just geopolitically significant, it's dimensionally significant, a place where Eden's reality has repeatedly broken through and will ultimately break through completely. But we don't have to travel to special places to access Eden's dimension. The dimensional interface we need is within us. Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within you, not as a metaphor, but as a dimensional reality. Each human being carries within them the capacity to resonate with Eden's frequency, to become a portal through which paradise can manifest. This is the hidden truth about spiritual practices across all traditions. Prayer, meditation, contemplation, worship. These aren't just psychological exercises. They're dimensional tuning practices, ways of adjusting our consciousness to resonate with Eden's frequency. When we experience peace that passes understanding, joy unspeakable, love that transcends human emotion, these aren't just nice feelings. They're tastes of Eden breaking through, samples of our true dimensional home. The mystics have always known this. When Meister Eckhart spoke of the ground of the soul where God is born, he was describing the dimensional interface within each person. When Julian of Norwich saw all of creation held in God's hand like a hazelnut, she was perceiving from Eden's dimensional perspective. When Rumi whirled an ecstatic dance, he was aligning his body with Eden's dimensional rhythms. But this isn't just for mystics and saints. Every human being has moments when Eden breaks through. That experience of beauty so intense it brings tears. That moment of love so pure it stops time. That glimpse of truth so clear it changes everything. These aren't just peak experiences. They're dimensional incursions. Moments when Eden's reality temporarily overrides our fallen dimension. Children seem to access these moments more easily, which is why Jesus said we must become like children to enter the kingdom. Children haven't yet fully adapted to dimensional reduction. They still expect magic, still see wonder, still believe in possibilities that adults have learned to dismiss. They're naturally more open to Eden's dimension breaking through. This also explains why suffering can sometimes lead to spiritual breakthrough. Intense suffering cracks the shell of our dimensional adaptation. It breaks down the barriers we built to function in a reduced reality. And through those cracks, Eden's light can shine. This isn't saying God causes suffering, but that even suffering can become a gateway to dimensional transformation. The dark night of the soul that mystics describe isn't God's absence. It's the disorientation that comes when our old dimensional framework breaks down before the new one is fully established. It's the vertigo of shifting between dimensions, the confusion of letting go of fallen reality before fully grasping Eden's truth. But what does this mean for understanding the ultimate restoration? If Eden exists in another dimension, perfectly preserved, what will it look like when that dimension fully merges with ours? The book of Revelation gives us glimpses, but they're so fantastic that most people assume they're purely symbolic. What if they're actually literal descriptions of dimensional merger? The New Jerusalem descending from heaven isn't a city floating down through clouds. It's Eden's dimension intersecting with and transforming our dimension. The measurements given -1, 500 miles in length, width, and height aren't describing a physical cube. They're describing dimensional fullness, reality expanded to its complete potential. The tree of life bearing 12 kinds of fruit, one for each month, isn't just a magical tree. It's the restoration of Eden's temporal abundance where time itself serves life rather than death. The river of life flowing from the throne isn't just symbolic of blessing. It's the literal return of Eden's dimensional rivers, flowing with the pure energy of uncorrupted reality. The statement that there will be no more sea doesn't mean the oceans will dry up. In ancient cosmology, the sea represented chaos, the dimensional instability that resulted from the fall. When Eden's dimension fully merges with ours, that chaos will be replaced by the crystal sea of dimensional stability, reality functioning according to its original design. Most significantly, the promise that God will dwell with humanity, that his tabernacle will be with men, isn't about God relocating. It's about the dimensional barriers being completely removed. The separation between heaven and earth, between Eden and exile, between divine and human realms will be healed. We'll exist again in the multidimensional reality we were created for. But this restoration won't erase history or undo experience. Everything that has happened in our dimensionally reduced reality will be incorporated into the restored reality, but transformed. Our tears will become jewels. Our sorrows will become songs. Our struggles will become stories of triumph. Nothing will be lost, but everything will be redeemed. This is why the biblical narrative ends not with a return to Eden, but with a city that incorporates Eden. The tree of life isn't alone in a garden, but in the midst of a street. The river of life doesn't water a pristine paradise, but flows through a populated city. Humanity doesn't return to innocent nakedness, but wears robes washed white. We don't go back. We go forward to something that includes Eden, but transcends it. The hidden truth about what really happened to the Garden of Eden reveals that God's plan was never simply to preserve paradise, but to expand it. Eden was the seed. The New Jerusalem is the full-grown tree. Eden was the local manifestation. The restored creation is the universal reality. Eden was the beginning. What's coming is the mature fulfillment of what Eden always pointed toward. And we're not passive observers waiting for this dimensional merger to happen to us. We're active participants in the restoration. Every choice we make either reinforces dimensional separation or facilitates dimensional healing. Every act of love weakens the barriers. Every moment of faith strengthens the connection. Every surrender to divine will aligns us more fully with Eden's frequency. This is why Jesus taught so insistently about the kingdom of heaven being at hand, being within, being like a seed growing secretly. He wasn't speaking in abstract spiritual terms. He was describing dimensional reality, Eden's dimension pressing in, growing within, gradually transforming our reality from the inside out. The parables of the kingdom aren't just moral teachings, they're dimensional descriptions. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven, because Eden's dimension works through our reality transformatively. It's like a treasure hidden in a field because Eden exists in the same space as our reality, but in a different dimension. It's like a pearl of great price because once you glimpse Eden's reality, nothing in our fallen dimension compares. This dimensional understanding also illuminates why faith is so central to spiritual experience. Faith isn't believing in things without evidence. Faith is the dimensional sense that perceives Eden's reality, despite the overwhelming presence of fallen reality. It's the faculty that resonates with Eden's frequency even when surrounded by dimensional static. It's the part of us that remembers home even in exile. Hope, too, takes on new meaning. Hope isn't wishful thinking about the future. Hope is the gravitational pull of Eden's dimension drawing us forward. It's the future reaching back into the present. Eden's reality creating echoes in our current experience. When we hope, we're not just imagining better days. We're responding to the actual pressure of Eden's dimension preparing to break through. In love, Love is the fundamental frequency of Eden's dimension, not the corrupted version we often experience in our fallen reality, but the pure creative force that flows from the heart of God. When we love truly, we're channeling Eden's energy into our dimension. We're creating pockets of paradise in the midst of exile. We're being dimensional conductors, allowing Eden's reality to flow through us into our world. This is why Jesus summarized all spiritual teaching in the command to love. He wasn't giving moral advice. He was providing the key to dimensional transformation. Love is how Eden's dimension expresses itself. Love is the frequency at which paradise operates. Love is the power that will ultimately overcome all dimensional barriers and restore the unity of heaven and earth. But understanding Eden's dimensional preservation also helps us comprehend why evil seems so powerful in our current reality. When humanity fell and our dimension was separated from Eden, we didn't just lose access to good things. We became trapped in a dimension where the absence of Eden's harmony creates what we experience as evil. Evil isn't a positive force equal and opposite to good. Evil is the distortion that occurs when reality is cut off from Eden's dimension. It's what happens when beings designed for multidimensional existence are confined to dimensionally reduced reality. Like a plant trying to grow without sunlight, creation twisted and distorted in the absence of Eden's dimensional nourishment. This is why evil often seems so creative, so dynamic, so powerful. It's not truly creative. It's the desperate adaptation of beings trying to exist in conditions they weren't designed for. Every form of evil, from petty selfishness to cosmic rebellion, is essentially a malformation caused by dimensional deprivation. But this understanding also reveals evil's ultimate weakness. Evil only exists in the absence of Eden's dimension. As Eden's reality breaks back into our world, evil doesn't have to be defeated through combat. It simply ceases to exist as the conditions that created it are healed. Like darkness fleeing from light, evil dissipates when Eden's dimension manifests. This is why Jesus' approach to evil was so different from what people expected. He didn't come as a warrior to fight evil with its own weapons. He came as a dimensional bridge, allowing Eden's reality to flow back into our world. He overcame evil not by opposing it with force, but by manifesting the reality in which evil cannot exist. The cross itself demonstrates this principle at the crucifixion. All the dimensional distortion of our fallen reality concentrated on Jesus, every malformation, every twisted adaptation, every evil that arose from dimensional separation focused its power on him, and he absorbed it all. Like a dimensional lightning rod drawing all the distortion into himself. But distortion cannot destroy harmony. Darkness cannot overcome light. The dimensional chaos of our fallen reality couldn't corrupt the perfect dimensional harmony that Jesus embodied. Instead, his death became the gateway through which Eden's dimension could flow back into our reality. The veil of the temple, the dimensional barrier between the Holy of Holies and the outer world, tore from top to bottom, symbolizing the opening of the dimensional gateway. The resurrection wasn't just Jesus coming back to life. It was the first full manifestation of a being existing simultaneously in both dimensions. Our fallen reality and Eden's preserved paradise. Jesus became the permanent bridge, the living gateway, the dimensional door through which anyone can access Eden's reality. This is the truth that transforms everything. Eden wasn't destroyed. It was preserved in another dimension. The fall didn't end God's plan. It initiated a more glorious restoration than simple preservation could have achieved. We're not abandoned in a broken world. We're being prepared for a dimensional homecoming that will surpass even the original paradise. Every longing we feel for something more, every dissatisfaction with the limitations of our current reality, every hunger for transcendence, these aren't signs of discontent or ingratitude. They're the homesickness of dimensional beings temporarily confined to reduced reality. They're the groaning of creation itself for the dimensional restoration that's already beginning. The Garden of Eden exists right now, in this moment, in a dimension just beyond our normal perception. It's not in the past. It's in the present, separated from us not by time or distance, but bidimensional frequency. And that frequency barrier is weakening. The veil is thinning. The dimensions are beginning to merge. Every generation has thought they might be the one to see the full restoration. And in a sense, every generation has been right. Because the restoration isn't just a future event. It's an ongoing process that each generation participates in. Every soul that aligns with Eden's frequency weakens the dimensional barrier. Every act of love creates a crack in the wall. Every moment of true worship opens a window between worlds. We are living in the time of dimensional convergence. The signs are everywhere for those with eyes to see. The acceleration of both good and evil, the intensity of spiritual experiences, the breakdown of old structures, the hunger for authentic spirituality. These aren't random social phenomena. They're symptoms of dimensional shift, signs that Eden's reality is pressing closer to ours. Signs that speak of quantum entanglement, multiple universes, dimensions beyond our four-dimensional spacetime. They're discovering through mathematics what mystics have known through experience. Reality is far more layered and complex than our normal perception suggests. The dimensional nature of Eden isn't contradicted by modern physics. If anything, contemporary science is finally developing languages to describe what ancient texts have always proclaimed. But scientific understanding alone won't open the dimensional gateway. Eden's frequency isn't accessed through intellectual comprehension, but through harmonic resonance. We don't think our way back to paradise. We tune ourselves to its frequency through love, faith, hope, and spiritual practice. We become instruments resonating with Eden's song until the barrier between performer and performance dissolves. This is why spiritual transformation often feels like dying and being reborn. We're not just changing our minds or improving our behavior. We're undergoing dimensional recalibration, adjusting from the frequency of fallen reality to the frequency of paradise. It's disorienting, sometimes painful, always transformative. But on the other side of the transformation lies the beginning of Eden experience even within our current dimensional constraints. The saints and mystics who have reported experiences of paradise weren't having hallucinations or wishful visions. They were experiencing dimensional breakthrough, temporary access to the Eden that exists right now in parallel dimension. Their descriptions: gardens of impossible beauty, music beyond earthly comprehension, light that communicates love, trees that sing, waters that heal. These aren't metaphors. They're literal descriptions of Eden's preserved reality. And these experiences aren't reserved for special people. Every human being has the capacity for dimensional breakthrough, because every human being was designed for multidimensional existence. The image of God within us includes the ability to perceive and interact with multiple dimensions of reality. The fall didn't destroy this capacity. It only blocked it, and the blockage is being removed. This is the ultimate hidden truth about what really happened to the Garden of Eden. It wasn't lost. It was lifted to safety. It wasn't destroyed. It was dimensionally translated. It wasn't abandoned. It was preserved as the seed of cosmic restoration. And now that seed is beginning to sprout, sending roots into our dimension, preparing to flower into a reality that will make the original Eden look like a mere sketch of the masterpiece God always intended. We stand at the threshold of the greatest dimensional shift in cosmic history. The Garden of Eden is about to return, not as a place we go to, but as a reality that encompasses everything. The dimensional exile is ending. The quarantine is lifting. The barriers are dissolving. And we, every one of us who carries the image of God, who feels the homesickness for paradise, who longs for the restoration of all things, we are part of this cosmic homecoming. The journey that began with expulsion from a garden will end with inclusion in a reality that surpasses every dream of paradise. The dimensional separation that has defined human existence, since the fall is giving way to dimensional integration. That will redefine what it means to be human. We are not just fallen beings hoping for forgiveness. We are dimensional beings preparing for restoration to our full multidimensional nature. This is why the message of Eden's dimensional preservation is so crucial for our time. We need to understand what we're preparing for, what we're being transformed into, what reality is in the process of becoming. The old heaven and earth, the dimensionally separated realities, are passing away. The new heaven and new earth, the dimensionally integrated reality, is emerging. And we are witnesses, participants, and beneficiaries of this cosmic transformation. But living with this knowledge requires a fundamental shift in how we approach everyday existence. If Eden exists in a parallel dimension, if we're in the process of dimensional convergence, then every moment carries potential for breakthrough. Every interaction could be a portal. Every choice affects the speed and smoothness of dimensional integration. This doesn't mean abandoning practical responsibilities or living in constant expectation of miraculous experiences. It means recognizing that our practical responsibilities are themselves part of the dimensional transformation. When we work with integrity, we're aligning with Eden's harmony. When we treat others with kindness, we're channeling Eden's love. When we create beauty, solve problems, build community, we're participating in the restoration of paradise conditions. The hidden truth about Eden's dimensional reality also illuminates why certain activities seem to accelerate spiritual growth. Music, for instance, has always been recognized as having special power to transform consciousness. This isn't just because of emotional associations. Music is fundamentally about harmony, resonance, and frequency, the very mechanisms by which dimensional alignment occurs. When we make or listen to music that resonates with Eden's frequencies, we're literally tuning ourselves to paradise. Art, too, takes on new significance. True art isn't just human creativity. It's dimensional channeling, bringing Eden's beauty into visible form and our reality. The greatest artists have always been those who could perceive beyond the veil and manifest what they saw in forms others could recognize. They're dimensional translators, making Eden's reality accessible to those who haven't yet developed their own dimensional perception. Nature experiences often trigger dimensional breakthrough because the natural world retains more of Eden's patterns than human constructions. A forest, a mountain, an ocean. These environments still vibrate with echoes of paradise. When we immerse ourselves in nature, we're surrounding ourselves with dimensional memory, allowing our bodies and spirits to remember their true frequency. But perhaps the most powerful dimensional practice is community rooted in love. When humans gather in genuine communion, something greater than the sum of individuals emerges. Jesus said, "Where 2 or 3 are gathered in His name, He is there among them." This isn't just spiritual presence, it's dimensional amplification. Multiple beings resonating with Eden's frequency create a field effect that can trigger breakthrough for everyone present. This is why isolation is so damaging to spiritual growth. We're designed for multidimensional community in Eden. Adam's first not good experience was being alone, not because God wasn't enough, but because humans were created to be dimensional bridges, not just vertically between heaven and earth, but horizontally between each other. We're meant to create networks of paradise, webs of dimensional connectivity that strengthen and stabilize Eden's manifestation in our reality. Understanding Eden's dimensional preservation also helps us comprehend the role of sacred texts. The Bible and other spiritual writings aren't just historical records or moral teachings. They're dimensional documents carrying within their very words the frequency of paradise. This is why sacred reading has always been a transformative practice. The words themselves, especially in their original languages, vibrate with Eden's reality. Hebrew, the language of Genesis, is particularly suited for dimensional communication. Its structure, where words share roots that reveal deep connections, creates a web of meaning that mirrors Eden's interconnected reality. When we read that God planted Nada a garden, and later read that Israel was planted Nada in the Promised Land, we're seeing dimensional echoes, patterns repeating across time as Eden's reality seeks to manifest. The Greek of the New Testament carries similar dimensional properties. When John writes, "In the beginning was the Word," he's using logos, a term that encompasses not just speech, but the organizing principle of reality itself. The word that was in the beginning is the same dimensional frequency that spoke Eden into existence, and continues to call it back into manifestation. But the dimensional truth of Eden also reveals why religious systems often become obstacles to paradise consciousness. When spiritual teachings become rigid dogma, they lose their dimensional flexibility. When practices become empty rituals, they stop resonating with Eden's frequency. When communities become exclusive clubs, they create new barriers instead of dissolving old ones. Eden's dimension doesn't respect our religious boundaries. The preservation of paradise wasn't done for one group or tradition. It was maintained for all humanity. For every bearer of the divine image, the dimensional restoration includes everyone who responds to paradise's call, regardless of the cultural or religious language they use to describe their experience. This is why mystics from different traditions often sound more like each other than like the orthodox members of their own religions. They're not betraying their traditions. They're accessing the same dimensional reality that transcends all traditions. They're drinking from the same rivers of Eden, experiencing the same trees of life, walking in the same garden where God still strolls in the cool of the day. The dimensional preservation of Eden also explains the phenomenon of prophecy. Prophets aren't fortune tellers predicting arbitrary future events. They're dimensional perceivers who can see Eden's reality pressing into our timeline. They observe the trajectory of dimensional convergence and describe what must happen as paradise manifests. Their visions of the future are really perceptions of Eden's present reality preparing to break through. This is why prophetic literature is so full of Eden imagery, rivers of living water, trees bearing healing fruit, lions lying down with lambs, children playing near serpents' dens. The prophets aren't imagining a nice future. They're seeing Eden's actual present condition and its dimensional sanctuary, waiting to merge with our reality. They're tour guides to a paradise that exists now but hasn't yet fully manifested in our dimensional space. Dreams, too, take on new significance in this understanding. During sleep, our conscious defenses relax, our dimensional rigidity softens. In dreams, we sometimes slip into Eden's dimension, experiencing realities that seem impossible by our waking standards. The flying dreams that humans universally report, that's memory of Eden's dimensional freedom. The dreams of lost loved ones appearing young and whole, that's glimpses of Eden's reality where death has no power. But not all dreams are dimensional experiences. Our psyche also processes daily experiences, fears, and desires. Learning to distinguish between psychological dreams and dimensional dreams is part of spiritual development. The dimensional dreams leave a different residue, a sense of having touched something more real than waking life, a homesickness more acute than before, a knowing that transcends rational understanding. Near-death experiences provide some of the most dramatic evidence for Eden's dimensional preservation. Consistently, across cultures and belief systems, people report remarkably similar experiences, leaving the body, moving through a tunnel, encountering a being of light, experiencing a life review, seeing deceased loved ones, glimpsing a beautiful realm they don't want to leave. These are hallucinations caused by oxygen deprivation. They're dimensional transitions, temporary shifts from our reality to Eden's. The tunnel isn't a physical passage, but a dimensional membrane. The being of light isn't a projection, but an encounter with inhabitants of Eden's dimension. The beautiful realm they glimpse isn't imaginary, but the actual preserved paradise where Eden continues to exist. The life review that occurs in these experiences is particularly significant. In Eden's dimension, time doesn't function linearly as it does in ours. Past, present, and future exist in a state of dynamic integration. During the life review, people aren't just remembering their past, they're experiencing how their lives appear from Eden's dimensional perspective, seeing the ripple effects of every action, understanding the interconnectedness of all things. Many who return from near-death experiences report that they no longer fear death. This isn't because they've become cavalier about life. It's because they've experienced the truth. Death isn't the end, but a dimensional transition. The Garden of Eden they glimpsed isn't a reward for good behavior, but our actual home, preserved and waiting for our return. But if Eden exists so wonderfully in another dimension, why don't we all just die and go there? Why continue in this dimensionally reduced reality? The answer reveals the profound purpose of our current existence. We're not here by accident or as punishment. We're here as part of the restoration process. Every soul that learns to resonate with Eden's frequency while still in this dimension becomes a bridge for paradise to manifest. We're like tuning forks, struck by encounters with the divine, continuing to vibrate with Eden's frequency in a world that's forgotten the song. Our presence here, maintaining paradise consciousness in the midst of dimensional exile, creates resonance that helps others remember. We're not waiting to escape to Eden. We're helping Eden return to encompass all reality. This is why spiritual teachers emphasize presence, mindfulness, and awakened consciousness. These aren't just techniques for personal peace. They're practices for maintaining Eden awareness in non-Eden conditions. When we're truly present, we're existing more fully in the now where Eden's dimension intersects with ours. When we're mindful, we're attending to the dimensional frequencies around and within us. When we're awake, we're conscious of both realities simultaneously. The role of suffering in dimensional transformation becomes clearer in this understanding. Suffering isn't punishment or meaningless tragedy. Suffering is often the friction between dimensions, the stress of beings designed for paradise trying to exist in reduced reality. But suffering can also be transformative, breaking down our adaptation to fallen conditions, creating openings for Eden's reality to break through. This doesn't glorify suffering or suggest we should seek it out. Rather, it reveals that even our most difficult experiences can serve the dimensional restoration. Every tear shed in this dimension waters the garden in the other. Every groan of creation vibrates across dimensional boundaries, calling Eden home. Every act of courage in the face of suffering weakens the barriers between worlds. The preservation of Eden in another dimension also illuminates the mystery of prayer. When we pray, we're not sending messages across vast distances to a distant God. We're speaking into the dimension where God's presence is immediate, where Eden's conditions still prevail. Our prayers ripple through dimensional space, creating waves that affect both realities. This is why persistent prayer is so powerful. It's not about convincing a reluctant God to act. It's about creating sustained dimensional resonance, maintaining a frequency bridge between realities until breakthrough occurs. When Jesus taught about persistent prayer, he wasn't advocating pestering God. He was describing the mechanics of dimensional interaction. Intercessory prayer, praying for others, works because we're all connected in Eden's dimension. In that reality, the illusion of separation doesn't exist. When we pray for someone, we're accessing our connection in Eden's dimension and channeling paradise energy. Through that connection into this dimension, we become conduits for Eden's healing power to reach those who haven't yet learned to access it themselves. But prayer isn't just petition. The highest forms of prayer are dimensional alignment practices, contemplation, adoration, communion. In these states, we're not asking for Eden to come to us. We're lifting our consciousness to Eden's frequency, experiencing the paradise that already exists, knowing ourselves as we truly are in God's preserved garden. The sacraments and rituals of various traditions can be understood as dimensional technologies, practices designed to thin the veil between worlds. Baptism isn't just symbolic washing, it's dimensional death and resurrection. Passing through the waters that separate realities, communion isn't just remembering, it's dimensional participation, consuming Eden's fruit in the form of bread and wine. These practices work not through magic but through alignment. They create conditions where participants expect dimensional breakthrough, where communities gather in frequencies that resonate with paradise, where ancient patterns proven to facilitate Eden access are repeated with intention. The forms matter less than the dimensional availability they create, but we must be careful not to confine Eden access to religious practices. The dimensional reality of paradise breaks through wherever love is genuine, beauty is perceived, truth is spoken, or goodness is enacted. A mother's love for her child opens dimensional portals. An artist lost in creation channels Eden energy. A scientist discovering truth about creation touches paradise patterns. Any human acting in alignment with their true nature as God's image creates cracks in the dimensional wall. This understanding revolutionizes how we view human potential. We're not trying to become something we're not. We're trying to remember and manifest what we truly are. Multidimensional beings temporarily experiencing dimensional limitation. Every human capacity, creativity, reason, emotion, will, intuition, has both a reduced function in this dimension and a full function in Eden's dimension. When we experience moments of extraordinary creativity, we're briefly accessing our Eden-level creative capacity. When love overwhelms us with its power, we're touching our true capacity for connection. When beauty stops us in our tracks, we're perceiving with Eden eyes. These aren't abnormal experiences. They're glimpses of normal experience in paradise dimension. The preservation of Eden also explains the persistence of what we call the paranormal. Telepathy, precognition, healing abilities, and other phenomena that don't fit our dimensionally reduced worldview aren't supernatural in the sense of being outside nature. They're natural capacities in Eden's multidimensional reality that occasionally manifest in our restricted dimension. Children often display these abilities more readily because they haven't yet fully adapted to dimensional limitation. They still expect reality to be magical because, in Eden's dimension, it is. As we age and adapt to this dimension's restrictions, we typically lose access to these capacities, but they can be recovered through dimensional reawakening. This isn't about developing psychic powers for personal gain. It's about recognizing that the boundaries we accept as absolute are actually conditional, temporary accommodations to a reality that's in the process of transformation. As Eden's dimension converges with ours, abilities that seem extraordinary now will become ordinary expressions of restored human nature. The implications for healing are particularly profound. In Eden's dimension, wholeness is the natural state, disease, dysfunction, and death are absent. When healing occurs in our dimension, whether through prayer, medicine, or spontaneous remission, it's Eden's wholeness breaking through. All true healing is dimensional. Restoring Eden patterns in bodies adapted to fallen conditions. This explains why some people are healed miraculously while others suffer despite fervent prayer. It's not about God playing favorites or faith being insufficient. It's about complex dimensional dynamics we don't fully understand. Individual readiness, community resonance, divine timing, and factors beyond our current comprehension. But every healing, however it comes, is a sign that Eden's dimension is pressing into ours, mental and emotional. Healing follows similar patterns. In Eden's dimension, consciousness is clear, emotions are pure, and relationships are harmonious. Psychological suffering often stems from dimensional dissonance, trying to force Eden expectations on non-Eden reality, or accepting non-Eden conditions as ultimate truth. Healing comes through aligning with what's true in Eden, while navigating what's temporary in this dimension. This dimensional understanding also illuminates addiction and compulsive behaviors. At root, these are misdirected attempts to access Eden experience. The addict isn't wrong to seek transcendence, ecstasy, or escape from dimensional limitation. They're only wrong about the method. Every addiction is a corrupted homesickness for paradise, seeking in substances or behaviors what can only be found through dimensional alignment. Recovery, then, isn't just about stopping destructive behaviors. It's about finding authentic ways to access what the addiction promised but couldn't deliver. It's about learning to get drunk on Eden's wine, high on paradise presence, addicted to dimensional breakthrough that satisfies rather than enslaves. The preservation of Eden in another dimension also reveals why beauty is so powerful and necessary. Beauty isn't superficial decoration. Beauty is Eden frequency made visible. When we create or perceive true beauty, We're experiencing dimensional overlap. This is why totalitarian regimes often attack beauty first. It reminds people of a reality beyond state control, a dimension where different laws apply. Every garden planted with love is an echo of Eden. Every piece of music that moves the soul is channeling paradise harmonies. Every act of architectural grace is patterning Eden's structure. We're not just making things pretty. We're creating dimensional bridges, material forms that carry paradise frequency and make it accessible to dimensional perception. But false beauty, the artificial, the manipulative, the seductive, these are dimensional distortions, attempts to mimic Eden frequency for non-Eden purposes. Learning to distinguish true beauty from false is part of dimensional discernment, developing the ability to recognize what resonates with paradise and what merely imitates its forms. The role of technology in dimensional transformation is complex. On one hand, technology can increase our alienation from Eden frequencies, surrounding us with artificial environments, replacing natural rhythms with mechanical ones, creating virtual realities that parody rather than channel paradise. On the other hand, technology can serve dimensional breakthrough, connecting people across distances, revealing creation's hidden patterns, enabling new forms of beauty and knowledge. The key is whether technology serves dimensional integration or increases dimensional separation. Does it help us remember our true nature or forget it? Does it connect us more deeply with creation and each other, or isolate us in artificial bubbles? Does it reveal Eden patterns or obscure them? Technology itself is neutral. Its dimensional effect depends on how we develop and use it. As we approach the culmination of this exploration, we must address what may be the most important question. How do we live knowing that Eden exists in a parallel dimension, perfectly preserved, waiting to merge with our reality? How does this knowledge transform daily existence? First, it changes how we view every limitation. Physical limitations, temporary accommodations to current dimensional conditions, relational limitations, artifacts of dimensional separation that love is already overcoming, mental limitations, restricted bandwidth that's expanding as we align with Eden frequency. Every limitation is real in this dimension, but not ultimate. Eden's unlimited reality is equally real and pressing in. Second, it transforms how we understand time. In Eden's dimension, time isn't linear progression toward decay, but cyclical renewal and eternal present. Our experience of time as loss is a dimensional artifact. In reality, nothing true is ever lost. Every moment exists eternally in Eden's now. This doesn't make our temporal experience meaningless, but gives it eternal significance. Every moment we live aligned with Eden frequency adds to the eternal symphony. Third, it revolutionizes our relationship with death. Death isn't the opposite of life, but dimensional transition. The preservation of Eden means that everyone who has ever lived in alignment with paradise frequency continues to exist in the dimension. The communion of saints isn't metaphorical, but literal dimensional community. Our loved ones who have died haven't ceased to exist. They've shifted dimensions, and the barrier between us is thinning. Fourth, it changes how we view progress. Human history isn't random wandering or inevitable advancement, but dimensional labor, the groaning and travailing of creation giving birth to paradise manifestation. Every genuine advance in human consciousness, every expansion of compassion, every increase in justice is Eden breaking through. We're not building utopia through human effort. We're preparing landing strips for paradise. Fifth, it transforms our understanding of evil and injustice. These aren't permanent features of reality, but temporary symptoms of dimensional separation. This doesn't minimize their current impact or excuse us from opposing them, but it does mean that evil's defeat is already accomplished in Eden's dimension and working its way into manifestation in ours. We fight injustice not in despair, but in certainty of victory. Sixth, it illuminates our purpose. We're not here to escape to heaven or resign ourselves to fallen earth. We're here as dimensional midwives, helping birth Eden's reality into this dimension. Every aligned choice we make, every frequency of paradise we maintain, Every bridge between dimensions we strengthen serves this cosmic purpose. We're not waiting for rescue. We're participating in restoration. Finally, it fills us with unshakable hope. Eden exists. Paradise is preserved. The garden awaits. The dimensional barriers are temporary. The restoration is certain. The reunion is coming. This isn't wishful thinking, but dimensional fact. Eden's reality is more solid than the passing conditions of our current dimension. What seems impossible by fallen standards is natural by paradise standards, and paradise standards are reasserting themselves. As we conclude this exploration of what really happened to the Garden of Eden, let the truth sink deep into your consciousness. Eden wasn't destroyed. It was dimensionally translated. It wasn't lost. It was preserved in pristine condition. It wasn't abandoned. It was prepared as the seed of cosmic restoration. Right now, in this very moment, Eden exists in its full glory just beyond the veil of ordinary perception. The tree of life continues to bear its 12 kinds of fruit. The rivers continue to flow with living water. The presence of God continues to walk in the garden in the cool of the day. Everything that was, still is. Everything that was lost is found. Everything that was separated is preparing for reunion. And you have traveled this journey of discovery with us. You are part of this cosmic story. You carry Eden's frequency in your very cells. You bear the image that qualifies you for paradise citizenship. You possess the capacity for dimensional perception that can pierce the veil. You are not just learning about Eden. You are remembering it, resonating with it, preparing to participate in its full manifestation. The homesickness you've always felt now has an explanation. The longing for something more now has a destination. The sense that reality should be different now has validation. You're not crazy or discontent or unrealistic. You're dimensionally aware, paradise attuned, Eden-oriented. You're exactly what you're supposed to be. A dimensional being temporarily experiencing limitation, but destined for restoration. Let this knowledge transform how you see everything. That tree outside your window, it's an echo of Eden's trees, maintaining paradise patterns despite dimensional reduction. That person you love, they're a fellow Eden exile, carrying paradise potential whether they know it or not. That moment of beauty that took your breath away, it was Eden breaking through, paradise asserting itself, dimension touching dimension. You're not living in a God-forsaken world. You're living in a world where Eden's dimension is pressing in from every side, where paradise is preparing to break through, where the garden preserved is about to become the garden revealed. Every sunrise carries Eden light. Every rainfall echoes Eden's waters. Every act of love channels Eden's fundamental frequency. The hidden truth about what really happened to the Garden of Eden changes everything. It reveals that loss isn't permanent, separation isn't eternal, and exile isn't forever. It proclaims that preservation was always the plan, restoration was always the goal, and reunion was always the destiny. As you drift into sleep, let your consciousness relax its grip on fallen dimension and open to Eden frequency. In your dreams, you may slip through the veil and walk again in the garden preserved. You may taste the fruit of the tree of life, drink from the river of living water, or hear the voice of God calling in the cool of the day. These aren't just dreams. They're dimensional memories, paradise previews, Eden experiences. And when you wake, you'll wake with a renewed awareness that Eden isn't lost in the past, but present in another dimension. You'll face your day knowing that every challenge is temporary, every limitation is conditional, and every separation is preparing for reunion. You'll live as what you truly are, a citizen of Eden temporarily on assignment in a dimension that's being transformed. The Garden of Eden awaits. It has always been waiting. It will not wait forever. The dimensions are converging. The frequencies are aligning. The barriers are dissolving. And soon, sooner than we might imagine, the hidden will be revealed, the preserved will be manifest, and the separated will be united. This is the hidden truth about what really happened to the Garden of Eden. This is the mystery revealed. This is the hope assured. This is the destiny approaching. Eden wasn't lost. We were, but we're being found. Eden wasn't destroyed. It was waiting for us to be ready for its return. And that readiness is growing with every soul that awakens to the truth. The garden is calling. Can you hear it? The dimension is pressing in. Can you feel it? The paradise is preparing to manifest. Will you be ready? The hidden truth has been revealed. The mystery has been unveiled. The invitation has been extended. Eden awaits your response. Sleep now in the peace of paradise preserved. Dream now of the garden that was and is to come. Rest now in the certainty that what was lost is found. What was separated is being reunited, and what was hidden is being revealed. The Garden of Eden lives, and because it lives, we too shall live in the fullness of paradise restored, dimension merged with dimension, heaven married to earth, Eden expanded to embrace all creation in the glorious fulfillment of God's original and eternal plan. The hidden truth has set you free. Now live in that freedom. Now rest in that knowledge. Now sleep in that peace. Eden is real. Eden is preserved. Eden is coming. And you, bearer of the divine image, carrier of paradise frequency, child of the garden, are going home. Not to a place you've never been, but to the place you've never truly left. The Garden of Eden, dimensionally preserved, eternally waiting, cosmically preparing for the greatest reunion in the history of creation. Welcome to the truth. Welcome to the mystery. Welcome to the beginning of your journey home. The Garden of Eden isn't lost. It never was. It's been right here all along. Just a dimension away. Just a frequency beyond. Just a transformation from manifesting in full glory. And now you know. Now you understand. Now you're ready for what comes next. The hidden truth about what really happened to the Garden of Eden has been revealed. Let it transform you. Let it prepare you. Let it call you home to the paradise that never left. Only shifted to a dimension where it could be preserved, protected, and perfected for this very moment when you would be ready to hear, believe, and respond to Eden's eternal call.